Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Play and Reconcile Smarter for SAP Business One. My name is David Knight from Codestone, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Theo Wasserberg, Head of UK for Embat. Theo, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. We have many SAP Business One customers that often talk to us about their challenges when it comes to manually reconciling bank statements and the pain of managing payments, moving files around, particularly multiple banks, and doing it in a secure way. It's something that lots of our customers have challenges with, and that's why we built this partnership with Embat, because it's something that you guys do really well. Theo, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great. David, thank you so much. Thank you for having us. It's great to be here and to speak to Codestone customers again. As you say, it's a real challenge, right? The reconciliation, payment, everything relating to banks and cash is just difficult in the world of ERPs, and that's something that we really specialize in and try to resolve. So you can think of us as a layer for connecting B1 and all the banks and different financial institutions, and then a platform for managing some of these processes, and finally a series of AI agents to help all those things run faster. So we've done some introductions. I'm going to give a quick demonstration of the solution. It's going to be a whistle-stop tour, and hopefully people that are interested can set up some time and we'll take them for a bit more of a deep dive. And then lastly, we can talk about some next steps. So just before we dive into the system, right, we're going to touch on four distinct areas. The first is bank connectivity. So the precursor to doing any of the things we're going to talk about today is getting connected to your banks in a way that means that you can move data back and forwards. The second one is bank reconciliation. So, how do we reconcile all of that data coming from the banks with data that's sitting in SAP B1? The third is payments, right? So if we're generating payment files, how do we move those, right, effectively between the ERP and the banks and push that data? And finally, I'm going to just touch very quickly on cash flow forecasting. That's something that everybody just does in Excel today, and it works, but it's quite manual and it's a little bit painful, and there's a lot of reconciling of data and consolidating things. So let me change my screen here. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, great. So we've got Embat here, and Embat is I'll get the boring bits out of the way. It's a web-based application. It's single sign-on. It's multi-factor authentication. It's ISO 27001, and it has all of the kind of security and encryption standards that you would expect for a system that's going to touch really sensitive to bank data. It's going to move payments, etc. So what I'm going to do is log into the system here, and the first thing you'll see is that we come to a home page, right? And I can see my cash position, some of my liquidity. And I'm going to just orientate you very quickly. So if I look to the left-hand side, I've got a series of modules, right? And that's what we're going to go through today. And if I look at the top here, you can see there's a number of entities, right? And so we've really built this with a multi-entity architecture in mind. And banks are inherently linked to their associated legal entity. So I can select one entity and you'll see the numbers change, but I could take multiple entities and take a partial consolidation. And this makes it very easy to roll up and down and take, the whole company or a group of companies or an individual entity as you as the user see fit. So let's just take this one entity. And the first thing I'm going to do is get connected to my banks. So we're jumping into the banking connectivity screen here, and you can see I've got a number of banks listed here, right? And first thing I'm going to do is just connect another one. So I'm going to connect via API, and I just want to show you how easy it is to connect to a bank. So let's take HSBC, for example, so a bank that lots of people are going to have a relationship with. And, I can see here immediately all of the HSBC entities globally. Let's just, for sake of argument, say we want to connect to one in the Netherlands, continue, and the screen, this will load a portal between Embat and HSBC, and I click connect, and if I share my whole screen, what you will see is that we have the HSBC authenticator open. So I would simply type in and authenticate the way I would Normally, I don't have a dedicated login, so I'm not going to do that. But when I then close it, and I will just adjust my screen back to this. When I then close it, you will see that I've got a live connectivity to banks, right? In this case, Barclays. I can see the balance live, but also I've now got what is a consolidated bank statement. So when I come across into my transactions, I can see all of the individual transactions from all of the different banks globally in a single place, right? This is already really useful because I can search this data. If CFO asks me how much do we spend on fees, I can just type in fees and find the items where that's perhaps flagged in the description. So that's all of the transactions, and that means I've got live cash visibility, I've got position, I've got all of my transactions in a single place. That's really useful. But at this point, all we've done is connect to all the banks, pull data, categorize it, and make it useful. Now we want to talk about reconciliations, and we call that accounting. So let me jump in here and go into an accounting screen. Now, lots of users will be familiar with this type of screen that I've got open here. So I've got transactions on the left. That's what we were just looking at, all of those transactions from all the banks. And on the right, we've got operations. And what we mean by operations is documents that are sitting in SAP B1, right? That can be invoices, it can be anything else. And so traditionally, you'd have gone to the left, you'd have found this payment, and you'd match it off with something on the right, and you would make a posting. But that, of course, is really manual and what we want to try and avoid. So if you're a user in Embat, most of the time you live in this validate tab. And what's happening here is you can see we've got a gray line, which is the transaction for the bank. And underneath, I've got a white line, which is the invoice that it's associated with. And the system has had a look and it said, well, these dates seem to match, this contact matches, and the values match. And so I think these two go together and should be reconciled. And critically, it's a suggestion. It's saying, this is what I think. It's not making the posting for you. And so I have to select it and hit post. And as soon as I hit post, in SAP B1, it's going to close the document and it's going to make the associated journal posting with its credits and debits. And the AI is really good at this because it can handle a little bit of real-world ambiguity. Traditionally, when you build a rule, it's very tightly parameterized. And if anything happens that's unusual, it falls over. And so if I give you just one example that everybody will be used to, somebody pays you, and what they've done is consolidate two invoices into one payment. Now, traditional automation rules wouldn't like that. It would fall over. But the AI can handle that because it can run some subtotals associated with that counterparty and say, yep, this payment matches to these two invoices, or it could be this payment matches to these 30 invoices. And that's really the difference between 20-30% automation that people typically see today and automation well into the 90% range that really dramatically reduces the time spent in these areas. It can also post directly to a GL, right? And so, if you take an intercompany payment as an example, there won't be an associated invoice, and we can post that directly against a GL, or we can make a posting directly against a contact sitting in SAP B1. And so that's our accounting and reconciliation tool, right? It's a really powerful engine that's just dramatically changing the workload for people when it comes to bank matching. Next, I'm going to jump into payments. So let me jump over here. And what you're looking at now is our payments module. And you can see a list here, and these are approved AP items. So these are invoices that are ready to be paid. Now, traditionally, you would create your batch and download that batch, go to the bank and upload it, and send that out. Well, that's an okay process, but files can be tampered with. And if you've got 5 different banks, that's suddenly becoming quite a bit of work to move all these files around and do all of the different logins. And so, we call this payment orchestration. I can build a batch in here, and I'll take, say, these 3. And let's say I want to pay it from any of my accounts, from any of my banks globally. Here, I've connected it to 3 banks, but let's just say I want to pay from my Barclays corporate account. I could pick the payment method if I've got multiple options. So let's say this is a chapped payment, and I can schedule that payment for the future. Perhaps I'm on holiday on the day I normally do our payment run, or I'm out next week. I can schedule that for the future, right? And that's a feature that lots of people find very useful. And lastly, I can notify my beneficiaries. So if I go into view, you can see I've got these 3 beneficiaries, and as soon as I send the payment, it will release that and send it out. Now, this is grayed out because this demo system isn't connected to the bank, but when I request approval, rather than have to go in the bank and do all of the approval flows, right, which are different for each bank, I can do those approval flows from a single system. It'll send a notification to all the users in the business and allow them to approve the payment file, the payment batch, and then it will release it to the banks. So, few key advantages there. 1, I don't have to log in and out of all these banks. 2, I don't have a file that can be tampered with. I have data integrity all the way through. The third one is that when you work in any ERP system and you download that file, everything gets marked as paid. But of course, it hasn't been paid because the money hasn't gone out the bank. Now, in this scenario, because it's connected to the bank, it doesn't mark it as paid until it actually has. And often people will find when they do a batch, one transaction gets rejected, they have to go back and do the reversal flow, and it creates more manual work because the systems don't talk to each other. Here, Embat is sitting between the banks and SAP B1, and it allows those systems to talk to each other. And so things are only really marked as paid when they're actually marked as paid. The fourth and final big benefit is we don't now need to do a reconciliation process for this. I can see the invoice here, and I've instructed the system to create the transaction in the bank. So we already know that that invoice matches that transaction, and we can put those together, reconcile it, and make the posting in SAP B1. So your bank matching and journal postings are bang up to date from the payments that you've made, and that's a really, really big value add for lots of our customers. That's everything on payments. Obviously, we can deep dive into lots more detail and hopefully take those as follow-ups. The final thing I want to do is just touch on cash flow forecasting, right? And just give a quick flavor of that. And again, something that we can take offline if people want to spend more time on that. So let me take you back to the screen around transactions. We started here when we connected up our banks, and this is all of these transactions from all the banks. If I look over to the right, you can see this categorization here. I've got a category column. And the system knows your unique cash flow structure for your business. And the AI is going through and saying, well, I can see what this is. This particular line is cash flow from operations, it's an OpEx, and it's IT and SaaS. So when I jump into a cash flow statement, I now have a direct cash flow statement, so direct method cash flow statement. And if I drill down through my outflows, my OpEx into IT and SaaS, I'm actually able to find those transactions and drill right down into that granular detail. That's obviously historic though. And one of the things I want to do is be able to project my cash flow forwards, and that's a lot of Excel time for people today. So let me jump into a 13-week cash flow forecast. You could build this for any periodicity and any length of time that you like, but I've got a 13-week here because that's what probably most people listening to this call will be operating on. And you'll see it's the same cash flow structure, but I've got these 3 different colors here. I've got purple, blue, and black. And they're basically 3 different methodologies for calculating the forecast. So blue is data coming from SAP B1. Right? And often people today will be downloading their AP ledger, transforming it somehow, putting it in an Excel, creating a cash flow forecast. Here, we don't need to do that. It just pulls directly in. And I can go here, say week 25, and drill down, and I will find all of the underlying invoices that make up this line coming from B1. The other thing is the AI. So lots of things don't have documents where you've got that has when it's coming from B1, it has a due date, the cash is going to move. But the AI can give you a view of things where there aren't documentation or for longer periods of time. So, perhaps payroll and pensions where you have a steady growth rate, or perhaps there's seasonality, and the system can can recognize that and bake something in for you. The third one is manual, right? And the reality of a cash flow forecast is you've got to get manual stuff in there. Perhaps it's a revenue prediction from the sales team. Perhaps it's, you know, an HMRC VAT refund that's a one-off, right? And the system can't know about that. And here you can just treat this as an Excel, and I can type data in here. But I can democratize access. So perhaps I do this at an entity level. I want to have a few different people that fill in their particular cells, and I can lock down access just so they can give me the data I need. The other thing that's very useful is this forecast is also attached to the banking products. So I can see, you know, in this example, I've got my Santander account here or my Monzo account, and I can see when these accounts perhaps go into the red, right? And so now I can start to sweep cash around and make sure that we're not, you know, slipping into our overdraft, that we're effectively using our cash and managing our liquidity. The final thing I just want to show you is the AI here. And the AI is not just saying, do all the manual work yourself. It's saying, hey, I think I've identified some of the manual stuff you're going to input, and I've prepared it for you if you'd like to review it. And so here it's saying, you know, here are some transactions that we think should be in your cash flow forecast. You can review and accept these and validate them as you see fit. So that's just an example of where it's taking a lot of the manual labor out of building some of these forecasts. So that's really it. That's a whistle-stop tour of Embat. You've seen how we connect to the banks, how we pull the data and all the transactions to the banks, how we run a reconciliation process to match what's in SAP B1 with what's coming from the banks. We've shown how the payments work. We can send payments out via all our different bank accounts in all of our different banks globally. And then finally, just touched on the cash flow forecasting at a very high level there about how you can start to think about coming off Excel for that. So really appreciate you taking some time out today, you know, and tuning into this webinar to learn a little bit about Embat. And perhaps with that, David, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Theo. I mean, that's an amazing demonstration, amazing power that you've demonstrated there. And I think it's going to resonate with many of our SAP Business One customers. And finally, thank you to everyone that's been watching. We really hope you found this useful. And if you'd like to find out more, please contact your Codestone account manager, or you can contact us on the slide in a second, which will have our inquiry details on it.